Hey, good day, everybody. I'm John PLESS, Catoosa County Public Information Officer, and today I am thrilled to be in the old Presbyterian Stone Church in Catoosa County, where there's so much history that predates the county itself. And the history is being preserved thanks to an organization called the Catoosa County Historical Society. That's our conversation today. So we'll talk about the church in just a moment. Let's get a few from the president, a little bit of background on the Catoosa County Historical Society. Your mission, I guess, is just to preserve history and to tell the stories of folks like us, but just at a different time.
It is. It's to preserve our county history and to help educate, especially younger people, younger folks, about our history, and to make not only preserve our church here, but our museum, and just do everything we can to create interest in history of Catoosa County.
What about young people? How important is it for young people? And when I mean young people, I mean people that are school age and 20s and 30s, but younger people to understand the stories and to maybe, use them as sort of a foundation of who they are here in this community.
Well, it is very important, and one of the things that we hope to do that will create more interest, I'll back up, we have had some teachers who have brought their students here and be given a tour of our church and the museum, and but we would like to see more of that, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we're going to upgrade our museum. And when that happens, we think it'll create a much more interest in our local history and hopefully attract younger people.
Yep. And Bill, appreciate you joining us as well. A lot of people regard you as the county historian, so people say that there's a lot of knowledge there. How important is history in terms of just explaining who we are today and where things are and how Catoosa County has grown to where it is right now in the 21st century?
Well, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been.
Right.
So Catoosa County is changing, and it sure is different from what it used to be.
Is the change good?
Yes, change good. We after the Civil War, we were pretty well burned out. And they put us in a depression that lasted until I-75 came through. When I-75 came through, we started to catch up economically with the rest of the nation, and since then have been doing pretty good.
Yeah,
we've gone from a small agricultural society to become a bedroom community for Chattanooga. You can have 5 acres in Catoosa County, be on I-75 and be at work in 30 minutes.
Isn't that something? We do live in a really ideal location because we do have Chattanooga, as you mentioned, just across the border. Atlanta, which is where I grew up, we go down occasionally on weekends for things, an hour and a half to 2 hours maybe to see a game. So we're in a pretty good location to be in between the big cities and have some breathing room here.
We're in an excellent location. The problem is we're filling up.
We are.
Excellent locations are not as common as they used to be.
Yep.
But anyhow, it's changing in Catoosa County. We used to go downtown to Ringo on Saturday, and we knew everybody that's walking up and down the street.
Yeah.
Now I won't know 1 out of 30.
Yeah.
But they're good people. We welcome them in. They've added quite a bit to the county as far as our churches and our community and so on. So it's good.
Yep.
It's good.
So would you say where we're in right now, the Old Stone Church, as a lot of people call it, the old Presbyterian Church, this is one of the cornerstones of Catoosa County that predates the county itself before it's separated. Why don't y'all tell me the story of Catoosa? Because where we are, this used to be Walker County. And
That's correct.
So that was in 1853. This church dates even before that.
Oh yeah, this church goes back to before the Indians left, to 1836. The They built a log cabin church south of here first, and then later on they built a frame church a little bit north. And then after they'd been here for 15 years, the church grew to where they decided they needed a new one, so they built this one. These people that formed the church were Scots, and they were from East Tennessee. For years, we had a lot more in common with East Tennessee than we did with Georgia.
Interesting. What brought them from East Tennessee to this area? Was it just opportunity, farming, agriculture, or?
New land and the Indian lottery.
Okay.
They surveyed Georgia in 1832 and started lotterying it off 160 acres at a time. And this was brand new land, and they could get their 160 acres and do pretty well with it.
160 acres is a pretty good patch.
Quarter of a section, yeah.
It
Pretty
is.
good patch, especially when you had to cut the trees off of it in order to plant anything.
Yeah. So the Scotch, if you will, or those of Scotch descent were attracted to this area, which is very interesting because a lot of us have those roots that tie back to Europe.
Oh yeah. Sure.
So there was a big Scottish presence or influence here.
A big Scottish-Irish presence. Most of them Presbyterian. The Baptists and Methodists came up from the Carolinas. The Hard Shell Baptists came up from South Georgia and South Alabama. And the mix got along pretty well up here. But it was primarily Scotch-Irish that settled.
So how did Catoosa County become its own county? If we were part of Walker County, was it some of these early settlers that decided they wanted their own county, or what was the drive behind creating Catoosa County?
The state of Georgia wanted a man to be able to go to the courthouse and back in one day.
And that was by horse, I'm assuming?
On a horse.
Okay.
On a horse. We couldn't do that because the county seat at that time was in Lafayette, and there's parts of the county where you couldn't get there and back in
Not
a day.
today. No, not by horse.
Yeah. So the people that owned Catoosa Springs Summer Resort used their influence in the state representative, in the state legislature, and got Catoosa County cut out of Walker County primarily, and a little bit on the north end off of Hamilton County, Whitfield County, to form what is now Catoosa County.
Was that a pretty easy, peaceful process, or did some people have to sort of negotiate where the line would be?
No, it was pretty peaceful process as far as I know.
Yeah.
I don't know of any conflicts they had.
Yeah.
So that's how we wound up to be in the county.
And so from there, from 1853 on, Ringgold was the county seat at the time?
That's correct.
And so that came about because of the railroad, or because of it was a place where we talk about this depot that is in downtown Ringgold a lot. But what got people to settle on Ringgold?
Well, Ringgold started off to being a crossroads. The Alabama Road was cut by Andrew Jackson going to fight the Indians down in Alabama.
Is this what we know as Alabama Highway today?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the Ooltewah-Ringgold Road was known as the Calhoun Road that went to Calhoun, Tennessee, where the Indian Agency was located.
Okay.
Then the north-south, what is now 41 Highway, went from Athens, Georgia, through the Cherokee Territory, through Ringgold, and on up to Nashville. So Ringgold was the crossroads.
Gotcha.
Then later is known as Taylor's Crossroads after Chief Taylor. And then in 1850, all that changed because the railroad came through. Ringgold became a railroad town with all the good and the bad and so on part of it. As a matter of fact, the first business license in Ringgold was for a saloon.
A saloon?
A saloon.
How about that?
Yeah. But it grew. The railroad brought in a whole different population of wheeler dealers and entrepreneurs and so on. And they were even going to run the creek around the side of the mountain with a flume line so that a number of different mills could run off of it.
Mm-hmm.
People scoured the country for mineral wealth, none of which they found.
Not in this church. It's pretty much just clay and rocks, as we know.
So it was a railroad boom town, and was doing very well. As a matter of fact, when the people in Washington wanted to know how the economy was doing, they checked with the bank in Richmond and with the bank in Ringo. The bank in Ringo,
Wow.
the bank in Ringo used to print its own money, which we have some.
And where was that Bank of Ringgold that what we know today? Can you give us a location of where that was?
About where the post office is.
The post. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a two-story building with columns and a veranda all the way around. And it burned in about 1926. So Ringo was a swinging place there for a while, but the Civil War brought all that to a screeching halt.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting now that you advanced the conversation to the Civil War. When I was speaking with Jim Ogden at the Chickamauga Chattanooga National Military Park, we were talking about the Civil War, and we got into a discussion about how families and neighbors were torn. And he told me a story about, I believe Catoosa County had 2 delegates at the time, and one was in favor of the Articles of Secession and another one wasn't. And that, that there were some divisions that divided families and friends over which way Catoosa County would go, whether it would go with the Union or if it would go with the Confederate States of America.
Well, I'll go back to what I said before. Catoosa County has more in common with East Tennessee than it does with the rest of Georgia, because East Tennessee was divided the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Catoosa County is still divided. It's been only recently that the Republican Party has made any progress at all. For years, it was a solid Democrat.
It was. I remember when we had a Democrat who's an attorney here in town now who represented Catoosa County in the state legislature, and I believe even some of the county commissioners at the time. I mean, as they called them, the Dixiecrats, way back when. But the Republican Party really did come about here in terms of politically. What about the 90s to the 2000s is when that started evolving?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. You mentioned that one voted to secede and the other voted not to. The one that voted not to was eventually shot by his neighbors and shot in the eye.
That's how bitter the differences were.
Yeah. That's the way they used to settle their differences.
You're right, yeah.
They thought they'd killed him, but he lost his eye, but he survived.
You're
Yeah.
talking about Yates.
And,
Yeah.
and did all right. Now, there were 2 people that really opposed Georgia coming out of the Union. One of them was from Fannin County, and they shot him. They killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was from Catoosa County, and
Interesting.
they tried to kill him.
So while all this was going on in the late 1800s, the Civil War, after the area was destroyed by the Union Army, and then that rebirth, this place that we're in now, this hallowed ground, this place stood, and it has served many different purposes over the years. So I think we want to go ahead and dive into that part of the conversation next, as to how this church really holds the key to unlocking some of the stories that you had alluded to. So we'll get into that in just a moment. We're going to continue our conversation with Maurice Bandy and also Bill Clark here on the Catoosa County Government Hour in just a couple moments. Stay with us.